When you are somebody who is very self-aware, but you keep making the same mistakes, or it keeps feeling like you're still in the same pattern, you're doing the same bullshit, you're reacting the same way, you are still overgiving in your relationships, you are still choosing emotionally unavailable partners, or it feels like you're in a relationship with somebody who is emotionally avoidant, where you're constantly asking for more and you're never getting your needs met, or it just never feels like it's enough, or you never feel like enough. And that can be down to not quite embodying everything that you're learning. And that's because your nervous system hasn't caught up yet. Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma, the podcast for millennial women who are ready to heal from the past. Here, we have the deeper discussions on emotional well-being and practical tips that will empower you to transform your relationships and underlying anxiety from insecure to secure attachment. I'm Lizandra, your host and psychotherapist. I'm a little bit obsessed with human development, deep conversations, and finding the lesson even in the most challenging of circumstances. I'm very happy to have you with me on this journey of self-discovery where we unpack the past and heal in the present. I've been feeling called to record this episode for those of you who are very self-aware, but also very anxiously attached. You might be someone who does all the journaling, you listen to the podcasts, you're here listening to this one, you read all the books, maybe you've dabbled in a little bit of therapy, maybe a bit of coaching, and you know yourself really, really well. Almost too well. You understand why you do the things you do. You can see it happening. You can see it playing out. You can see it playing out in your relationships. You understand why you tick. You can identify your triggers. You're very attuned to what your internal world is like. You're very in tune as to why you think, feel, behave, react the way that you do. But you have limitations. And those limitations usually come in. You are so self-aware that you know what to do, but you're not actually embodying it. You're not actually sure how to actually do different, be different, get different results in your relationships, feel different within yourself, because you're still repeating and replaying those same patterns and those same abandonment wounds. That is what we are unpacking in today's episode. So stay tuned, strap in, let's unpack. But before we do get into the juiciness of this episode today, I have something to ask of you. Now, if you have been listening to the podcast since the beginning of, not that long ago, late last year is when I started this podcast. And I've been getting lots of really great feedback. But what I actually need from you as a listener, as somebody who is listening to this specific episode, is for you to rate the episode, preferably with 5 stars, and leave a review. The more that you subscribe and leave the reviews and share with a friend, all of those good things, the more people are able to find the episodes. So the only thing I'm asking of you today is to just leave a rating. So click on the 5 stars, or you've listened to any of the other episodes and you found them to be insightful, helpful, enjoyable, and you want to appreciate and value the work and the time that I'm putting into these episodes, I would really appreciate it. Even if you never work with me or you never have the intention of working with me, but you get a lot of free value from these episodes, that's another way that you can pay it forward, just to show me your appreciation, is to leave me a little cheeky review and tap on those stars. And I am going to be entirely honest with you, bit of self-disclosure, I actually hate asking for things. So actually asking for that was really awkward and hard for me to do. But it has a means to an end and it's coming from a good place and it will help me in the long run. So I am putting it out there and I am asking, look at me, that's growth, right? And that's what this whole process is all about. And I'm doing it in action. What is it about vulnerability that makes you stumble over your words and trip up? If you only knew how hard it was for me to actually put those words into the microphone. So now that the ask and the vulnerability and the discomfort for myself is out of the way, let's continue with today's episode, which is all about being self-aware and also having anxious attachment. Many people who are self-aware almost mistake that being self-aware is enough, as though that is the thing that is going to save them from their trauma and help them to unburden themselves from their attachment wounds and from things from the past, when actually self-awareness is actually the first stage towards healing. And of course, self-awareness can be helpful, but too much self-awareness almost hinders your ability to heal. And that comes from being so much into your head, trying so much to intellectualize your feelings, make patterns, make connections, but not really doing anything about that change. Just kind of sitting in the space of learning and absorbing and getting all of this psychoeducation. So learning all of the buzzwords, what abandonment wounds means, what inner child healing means, what shadow work means, but they're all just terms and theory unless you're actually putting it into practice and embodying what you learn. Because you might have the feeling that, well, if I already know all of this about myself, there's nothing that nobody else can tell me about me more than what I already know. Maybe you've got the idea of, if I know everything, then that means I can think my way out of this mess. That means I can think my way out of trauma. That means I can think my way out of these kind of responses. And unfortunately, as much as I wish it did, it just doesn't work like that. You might know in certain situations that you're overreacting and that your thoughts are spiraling and you are automatically assuming the worst, possibly catastrophizing, and maybe one thought goes into another and you've basically thought up the worst case scenario. You might be able to recognize that you are over talking, or you are over explaining, you are calling too much or texting too much because you feel unsafe, because you feel rejected, because there are those feelings of abandonment coming up and you feel unsafe. You might be even starting to panic about that. But the thing is, it's not a mindset issue. It's actually a nervous system issue, and it's a relational wound. And we heal relational trauma through relational experiences. And there is a difference between a cognitive knowing, so understanding and being able to think our way through things, and an embodied knowing, which is more of an internal process. And it's being able to understand more of your patterns and working through that in a way that helps you to actually feel safe in your body. And that is so much harder to do than picking up the books and binging tons of content on anxious attachment and avoidant attachment and why does she do this? Why does he do that? It can help, but it can only get you so far. Quite often our attachment wounds show up and live in our nervous systems, and not just solely in our thoughts. Untangling your thoughts and understanding your patterns, that most definitely helps. And as much as we think we know about ourselves, no matter how self-aware we are, we do not and cannot know everything about ourselves, because again, that's just not how we are wired. There is so much of ourselves and of our brains that we do not have conscious access to. And a big part of the therapeutic journey and being in therapy and being in a space with somebody who is trained to understand human behavior, attachment patterns, emotional connection, is that it helps you to tap more into the unconscious parts of our brain, the unconscious parts of our memories. And when it comes to trauma, sometimes it's not even about just accessing our unconscious parts, because sometimes our trauma is so deep within our nervous system. Sometimes it's not even our own trauma. Sometimes it's the trauma of our parents or the generations before us, because trauma is also passed down through generations, through genetics. So it's not just about what we know and what we can remember, because there is so much more that we don't even have access to, that we can't process through language necessarily. And that's not to diminish talking things through in any capacity, but it is more aimed at the people who have done that inner work with themselves. And maybe you've even been to therapy before, maybe you've seen a therapist before. One of the things that I really love working with, or certain type of clients that I really love working with, are people who are really self-aware and who have been to therapy before. So it's not their first rodeo. They've seen someone before, and then they almost outgrow that therapist and they decide that they want to go a little bit deeper. Now, that's not to say that the first therapist that they saw wasn't able to go deeper necessarily, but I think different therapists just have different skills, and we connect to different therapists in different ways. And where one therapist might only touch the surface level stuff, that could also depend on how far they've gone in their own healing work. That might also depend on if or how much therapy they've had themselves. We can only go as deep with others as we have met ourselves. So I tend to work really well with people who have had therapy once, twice, maybe even 3 times before, and they want to go a little bit deeper on understanding their childhood, because not all therapists can actually stay with that work. Some therapists might be more into just being led by the client, which is more of a person-centered approach, which also definitely has its value, but it's not always for everyone. And I know for me, that's not really what I need when I see a therapist. I need somebody who's going to kind of get in there with me, again, because I am self-aware. But like I said, there are limitations to that self-awareness, and we can think that we know it all, or we can think that we know so much about ourselves that there's nowhere else for somebody else to take us. And that's not always true, because it's one of those things that we don't always know what we don't know. That's the whole point of it kind of being inaccessible to us. But sometimes somebody seeing us, whether it's holding space, whether it's noticing a certain pattern that we do or a certain way that we talk about something, that really can change so much about understanding ourselves. So it's not just that somebody else knows you better than you know yourself, because I think whether you're self-aware or not, there's nobody that's going to know you better than you. But seeing somebody in a therapy space can actually help you to see a different side of you, maybe a side that you've not necessarily thought of, or a side that you've not been able to allow to take up space. And when you are somebody who is very self-aware, but you keep making the same mistakes, or it keeps feeling like you're still in the same pattern, you're doing the same bullshit, you're reacting the same way, you are still overgiving in your relationships, you are still choosing emotionally unavailable partners, or it feels like you're in a relationship with somebody who is emotionally avoidant, where you're constantly asking for more and you're never getting your needs met, or it just never feels like it's enough, or you never feel like enough. And that can be down to not quite embodying everything that you're learning. And that's because your nervous system hasn't caught up yet. Your nervous system is still in the anxious patterning. And when that happens, part of you trying to feel safe again is through you intellectualizing. It's through you trying to understand yourself more. It's through trying to understand them more. And it can actually make you feel more anxious. And it's more of your anxious attachment patterning that's showing up in those moments. It's not actually the moments where you're feeling secure within yourself, or grounded, or embodied in secure attachment. In therapy, a process is learning to slow things down, because we can be very reactive and we can respond to things rather than taking the time to pause and feel our responses, rather than just automatically responding to them. So quite often in my work with clients, it's about slowing that process down. It's about noticing how you feel in the moment through bodily sensations, what you might notice physically. It's becoming more in tune with your body and doing that in integration with the understanding. It's very hard if you are someone who is very self-aware and is someone who articulates how they feel through words, to then suddenly be like, okay, so where do you feel that in your body? And again, that work is also very powerful, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And being real, that's like a very weird question to ask someone, right? In just like the normal scope of living, if somebody says to you, and where do you feel that in your body? Like what? What does that even mean, right? So I go there gently with clients just to kind of introduce that, but without it being like weird or like woo, because it's not woo. It is based in science, and it is based on somatic therapy, and somatic is just of the body. So it's connecting your body, and your body is your nervous system. So it's healing and it's processing trauma, but it's not just through what we cognitively understand. It's having a mind-body approach, which works really well in not only attachment trauma, but just trauma in general. And I think anything that is related to our well-being should have a holistic approach of what's going on in the mind and what's going on in the body. So that also incorporates, nutrition, lifestyle, quality of life. All of those things make up the whole of a person, right? So it only makes sense in the therapy and healing space as well that we also not only stay with what we think and what we can articulate, but also just paying more attention to what is also going on in the body and how we can incorporate that in a way that feels realistic for you and not out of the scope of what the fuck is this therapist talking about. When you are trying to heal from anxious attachment, we heal and we co-regulate with other people through safe relationships. It's not just what's happening in your head. It's also finding safety within those relationships. And when I'm talking about safety, I don't mean physical safety, because there's going to be people who you are not in harm's way with them specifically. They're not going to physically hurt you, and you're aware they're not going to physically hurt you, and you don't feel unsafe in the sense of they're a dangerous person, but maybe they feel unsafe emotionally because they are very dismissive of your feelings, or they're very invalidating, or it feels like you're constantly having to explain yourself. When you don't have those things, those are the things that lead to having a lack of safety in relationships. So the more that you're able to express yourself in safer relationships and do that in a very embodied way, so you're living it, you're doing it, you're practicing it, that's what can help get you out of the intellectualizing stage and more along the phase of, okay, how do I integrate what I'm learning into my relationships? How do I put this into practice? How do I live it? And how do I feel it? Part of that is through inner child work and reparenting yourself. And when I speak of reparenting, it's a process of giving yourself more of what you needed as a child, more of what you needed when you were experiencing those childhood wounds of inconsistent care, not feeling like enough, or feeling like you're too much, feeling like you're too sensitive, feeling like you're misunderstood, and thinking, okay, what did I need back then? And how can I start giving that more to myself? How can I show up for myself in the ways that I wasn't showed up for when I needed it? And that's a form of reparenting yourself. It's being kinder to yourself. It's listening to yourself. It's self-validating. It's finding safety. It's being grounded within yourself instead of expecting somebody else or someone else to give that to you. And the thing is, you're never going to feel 100% safe in a relationship if you have experienced relational trauma and you've been let down by relationships in the past. It does mean that it makes it harder for you to be able to actually trust in relationships anyway. So there is always going to be this element of doubt, and the thing that you fear, like the rejection and the abandonment, that's the thing you end up looking out for. That's the thing that you're trying to prevent. And because of that, it can almost feel safer for you to almost have one eye open or kind of side eye and be like, okay, I need to brace myself because I don't know when the abandonment is coming. I don't want to be caught off guard. And it's almost like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop because you can't believe in certainty in relationships. That doesn't mean that your partner has to be this perfect, secure partner who validates all of your emotions, who sits with all of your feelings. If you have that, amazing. But if you don't, there are still ways that you can learn what safety feels like. And it might not be in your romantic relationship. It might be in other relationships. And if it's not showing up in your romantic relationship in the way that you would want it to, well, maybe there's some questions about that relationship that you need to ask yourself. So if you are somebody who is very self-aware and you are an overthinker, I would just encourage you to try to slow things down and to notice. Just notice when you try to overthink your way to safety. And as hard as it is, try to do this without any judgment. To just notice what you notice about it. Just be curious about it. Have an amazing day, and I will speak to you soon. Bye. Thank you for joining this episode of Healing Childhood Trauma. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. Remember, healing is a journey and you are not alone on this path. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. And you can share this episode with a friend. Your feedback helps this podcast to reach more women who are ready to heal and build secure, healthy relationships and heal from the past.